Hi, and welcome to my training course on PowerShell learning. So the goal of these series of courses that we're creating is to teach you PowerShell via demonstration, right? Basically demoing some real world scenarios, right? And how you can leverage the Power Platform. Of course, the best way to learn anything is by doing, right? The hands-on is basically how you pretty much retain that information. So the intended audience for this particular training series of videos, basically anyone with a will to learn PowerShell, right? That can be anyone from desktop administrators, systems administrators, developers, anyone with a will that wants to learn some automation, right? How you can automate the Windows platform by leveraging PowerShell. So in the first video, we're going to basically step you through configuring your workstation, basically your desktop, your laptop for writing PowerShell code. So we're just basically getting your environment prepped so that you're ready to go. So with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump right in. Okay, so here we are at my desktop. So I'm currently running the Windows 10 operating system, as you can see. Um, Also, just keep in mind that this also applies to Windows 11, so it's not really, specific to Windows 10. So again, the same, what we're about to demo here pretty much applies to Windows 11 operating system as well. So you can basically follow the same steps and produce the outcome, the expected outcome. So first thing, if you check your workstation, bottom left-hand corner, you will see, and if you do this a search for PowerShell, you will notice that a few options will most likely come up. You'll see like 4 different options. So at the top, this is the PowerShell. This is typically the module that you go to when you want to write just like one-line commands for PowerShell, right? And again, we'll demo this as well. The ISE, Windows PowerShell ISE, is what's provided by Microsoft. It's an integrated scripting environment. So when you want to write some more advanced scripts, then you typically use like the ISE. You could leverage the ISE, and there's another ISE as well that I'll demo later on in this course as well. So also you have the Windows PowerShell x86, which is similar to the one here, which is basically 64, but they just don't mark it as 64. But it's for 32-bit operating systems. And the same applies for the ISE as well as x86, which refers to the 32-bit operating system. In my case, I'm running the 64-bit operating system, so I will be leveraging this PowerShell here. So by default, again, Microsoft out of the box, it ships with PowerShell 5, version 5. And again, that's sort of an old, outdated version of PowerShell. So what we need to do here is basically install PowerShell 7. And so to install PowerShell 7, basically if you go to pull up your browser, it can be any browser. And if you just go to Google, I'll just go to google.com for this example. And if you do a search for PowerShell 7, you'll see some various options that come up. As you can see, the first option that shows for me, and it probably looks similar on your workstation as well, is installing PowerShell on Windows, right? So if you select that option, you'll be presented with various choices for installation. You have WinGit, MSI package, zip package, .NET Global tool. So just various means where you can actually perform the install. Probably the most easiest way to install it is via the MSI package. Just kind of packages and makes it a little easier for your installation. So in this demo, I will use MSI package. So you select that option. At the top, you will see like 3 options, right? So you see PowerShell x64, which is 64-bit for the 64-bit operating system. You see x86, which is for the 32-bit operating systems of Windows. And you see the ARM 64-bit, which is for the ARM 64-bit operating systems. In this particular case, I'm running the x64, and most likely in your case as well, you may be running the x64. So I'm going to select this x64 option. and you'll see the download starts and goes into the downloads folder. All right, so once the download is complete, you can go and basically perform the install. So once the install is down, you see it's in my downloads folder. Most likely we'll go to your downloads folder as well, and basically just double click on it. And you'll see the installation begins, and next. And for the most part, you can select all the default options, right? Unless you have a need to change the path, but the default path in this case is pretty much good. So basically select next. And again, you're provided with some various options. For the sake of this video, I mean, for the most part, the default is fine and all that you need. So I'll just select next. And the next option is Microsoft updates, right? How do you want to receive your updates? Again, you can just kind of keep the defaults is fine. Just kind of keep those default and next. And next, you just click the install to start the installation. And you may be presented with this prompt, so you can select yes. And the installation will begin. May be slightly faster on your workstation, just depending on the speed of your system. All right, so once the installation is complete, just click the finish. You don't have to launch PowerShell now, just click finish. And the installation is now complete, so we can now exit out of the browser. So once the installation is complete, you will see, most likely if you go to your start menu, you'll see maybe recently added PowerShell 7, and that's that contains the PowerShell 7 modules. Also, you can go back here and just search for PowerShell if you like. And again, you see an additional item that was added, which is PowerShell 7. And again, you still have this PowerShell version as well, but again, that's version 5 of the PowerShell modules. But again, we want to kind of leverage the PowerShell 7 as much as possible. But one thing you can check the version of PowerShell that's running. So for instance, if I go to this PowerShell 7 here, and to check the version of PowerShell that's running, you can basically do $$ PS version table, and you can do just PS version. And you can see the version that comes back, this is version 5. If you look at the major, this is version 5 of PowerShell. And again, this is the PowerShell 5 version of PowerShell. Now if I go to the other and do another search for PowerShell, and if I look at the PowerShell 7 module, and you can see pretty much along the top of it, it tells you it's version 7.4.6. But again, we can perform the same thing, and if you just wanted to type the command PS version table, and you can see kind of auto IntelliSense for me. And if I do that, then you can see the version 7 that's running within this platform. So again, that's what you need to kind of get set up or installing the PowerShell 7 modules. Next step is basically installing the Visual Studio Code. Okay, so what is Visual Studio Code? Visual Studio Code is an integrated development environment, also referred to as an integrated scripting environment when it comes to PowerShell. It supports a number of programming languages. So why do I prefer Visual Studio Code over other PowerShell editors? Because Visual Studio Code is a very powerful tool. It provides what's referred to as IntelliSense. It kind of helps with the streamlining of writing PowerShell code. Basically, and also provides like a rich feature, basically known as like auto completion, right? So it just helps you when you're developing your PowerShell code. Um, Also, it also helps with debugging, testing, and various other aspects as well. So that's why I prefer Visual Studio Code when I'm writing PowerShell scripts. So with that being said, let's jump in and perform the installation for Visual Studio Code, also referred to as VS Code. So you may see me use the term VS Code for short. So first thing we're going to do is open up my browser, and basically I'm going to go to google.com and just going to do a search for VS Code. So you can search Google. I'll also provide a link, direct link to the download within the YouTube channel or within the YouTube video below. But for the sake of this video, just so you'll see, so if you go to Google, type VS Code, you'll get probably multiple entries that come back. You'll see the very top one is Visual Studio Code, Code Editing Redefined. So basically, I'm going to click on this link. And at the top, you'll see there's a download link that you can use here. And there's also a download for Windows here as well. So what I'm gonna do is just basically click on the download link above. Oops. And once you click on that download link, you'll get various options. You can see VS Code is basically supported on various platforms, right? You have Windows, you have Linux, and you also have Mac. In this particular course, we're using Windows, but again, if you're using Linux or Mac, then you just select the appropriate installation. But for the Windows, you'll see several options here. And the top two are the ones I'm just going to kind of highlight and focus on. The user installer is basically installs for one user. So the current user who's currently signed into the system, they'll be the only ones able to use the VS Code once it's installed. Then you have the system installer, which is basically anyone who logs on to that system, to the system you're currently using, they will have access to use VS Code. So for the sake of this video, I'm just going to use the system installer. So I'm going to select the X8. So you have X64, which is a 64-bit, and the ARM 64-bit. So you would select the one that's appropriate for your system. So in this case, I'm just going to select the X64 because that's appropriate for my system. So once I click on that, you can see the download begins. And so the download is running. And if I go to my downloads folder, you will see basically Visual Studio setup. So VS Code setup.exe file, which I'll double click on to start the installation. So again, you're prompted with do you want to allow the VS Code to install? I'm just going to select yes. And you may or may not receive that prompt. The next thing you get is the license agreement. So basically go through, review the agreement, and accept the agreement. This is setting the destination location, right, where you want the installation files to go. In this particular case, I'm just going to stick with the default, which is C program files, but you can change this as needed. But again, I'm sticking with the default. Next, this is the start menu folder, what the name of the folder will be within the start menu. So the default is Visual Studio Code, and it's the one I'm just going to stick with. I'm just going to stick with the defaults. Select next. Then the next one gives me various options where I can create a desktop icon. I can add options to the menu. I'm just going to stick with the default, and I'm also going to select create a desktop icon just so it places an icon on my desktop for easy access. So next. Next screen is an overview of basically all the options I selected. And I'm just going to click install. And that will start the installation. and that may take a few seconds, up to a minute or so, just depending on the speed of your system. So we'll let that install. And almost done here, getting towards the end. Okay, and once the installation is complete, you get this finish setup wizard screen where you can see the option to launch Visual Studio Code is currently checked. So I'll leave it checked. That way it opens or launches Visual Studio Code once I click finish. So you see it opens up VS Code. So now we're actually within VS Code. So the next step is for us to go through and configure VS Code so that we can write PowerShell scripts. The last configuration component consists of installing the PowerShell extension within VS Code. Again, this VS Code, this extension, PowerShell extension that we're going to install just gives you, again, that rich IntelliSense and kind of guides you and helps you kind of streamline some of your PowerShell development. So once you're in VS Code, on the left side, you will see this icon here. Looks like four little blocks. If you click on that, basically it's extensions. And if you do a search for PowerShell, it will most likely be the first option, but you can see it looks like this icon here. You can see it's developed by Microsoft company. And as of today, you have 13 million downloads. So basically, you would just click here, and you can click on install here, or you can click install there as well to install this module extension. So if we click on install, it gives you a status that shows that it's installing, and it may take a few seconds or so to install this PowerShell component. And again, you see the available features that this extension provides: syntax highlighting, code snippets. So you see it provides a number of things. And again, it's going to help you and guide you with your PowerShell scripting or PowerShell coding. Okay, so once the installation is complete, it tells you to install the PowerShell 7 module, but again, we've already went through these steps. So only thing we have to do is browse down to the bottom here and say mark done. We're basically telling it, okay, we've already installed PowerShell 7, so there's no need to reinstall PowerShell 7. So at this point, you're done. Your environment should be set up, and you should be ready to start developing or writing PowerShell code. In the next video, we'll jump into some more topics, but this concludes this portion of the video, configuring your environment.